After being betrayed, she arrived in baggy clothes with a crumpled résumé to be his daughter's nanny. He, a millionaire CEO, treated her with disdain. Months later, at a gala, she appeared stunning, and everyone desired her. And what he did that night left everyone shocked. The door closed behind Abigail Carter with a soft click, a sound so faint it might have been the final whisper of a world crumbling. There were no shouts, no shattered plates, no melodramatic spectacle like the one splashed across TV screens, only the heavy silence of betrayal and the cold dignity of someone refusing to break in public. Inside that apartment, which for 5 years she had called home, was Daniel, the man she'd given her brightest smiles, and another woman, her cheap perfume now tainting the air that once belonged to them alone. Abigail didn't look back. She carried a single suitcase packed in haste and a purse where her heart seemed to have lodged, heavy and aching. On the streets of Chicago, the air, thick with ambition and exhaust, filled her lungs. It was night, and the city thrummed with a life that seemed to mock her stillness. The skyscraper lights were like indifferent eyes watching her solitude. She walked aimlessly, the wheels of her suitcase grinding against the uneven sidewalk. Each step was a fight against the urge to collapse on the curb and let the tears burning her eyes finally fall. But she didn't. In that moment, under the artificial glow of the city, Abigail made a silent vow, a pact with the woman reflected in the dark storefronts. She would start over. Not for revenge, not to prove anything to Daniel, but for herself. She would find her way back to the Abigail she'd been before him. The vibrant, dream-filled woman who'd been lost somewhere along the way, dimmed by a love that turned out to be a lie. The night blurred into a haze of tangled thoughts in a cheap downtown motel, the kind of place that doesn't ask questions. At dawn, the pain was still there, a loyal companion, but the promise from the night before pushed her out of bed. With her dark hair pulled into a messy bun, wearing faded jeans and a loose sweater that hid her frame like armor, she stepped out to face the urban jungle. In her purse, alongside the few documents she'd grabbed, was her résumé. The slightly crumpled pages listed her experience as a receptionist and administrative assistant, skills that now felt like relics of a past life. The first rejection came from a law firm. "No openings right now, but we'll keep your résumé on file," the receptionist said with a practiced smile. The second, from a marketing agency. "We're looking for a more dynamic profile," the HR manager said, eyeing her with barely veiled disdain. The third, fourth, fifth, each closed door chipped away at her hope. The midday sun scorched the pavement, and Abigail's stomach growled, a harsh reminder that dignity didn't fill an empty belly. She bought a hot dog and a coffee with the spare change she found in her pocket and sat on a bench in Millennium Park, watching the endless stream of people. So many faces, so many lives intersecting, and she felt utterly invisible, a ghost in the crowd. That's when reality hit her like a punch. She was alone, truly alone. The sting of betrayal mingled with fear of the future, and the walls she'd built around herself began to crack. A single tear escaped, tracing a quiet path down her cheek. It was at that moment, when the world seemed to have turned its back on her, that a small, sweet voice pulled her from her daze. "Lady, why are you crying?" Abigail looked up and met a pair of wide green eyes staring at her with genuine curiosity. They belonged to a girl, maybe 5 or 6, with chestnut curls that glinted in the sunlight. In her tiny hand, she held a slightly wilted daisy, which she extended toward Abigail. "Here, so you won't be sad anymore." The simple, pure gesture broke something inside Abigail. She took the flower, her fingers brushing the girl's for a moment. A warmth seemed to travel up her arm, chasing away the chill in her soul. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick. "It's beautiful." "My name's Sophie," the girl said, plopping down beside her on the bench with the ease of someone reuniting with an old friend. "What's yours?" "Abigail." "Abigail," Sophie repeated, testing the sound. "That's a fairy tale name." Abigail couldn't help but smile, a real smile, the first in hours. Their conversation flowed effortlessly. Sophie chattered about her school, her stuffed bear named Snickers, and how she hated green beans. Abigail listened, captivated by the child's innocence and infectious joy. For a few minutes she forgot Daniel, The empty apartment, the crumpled resumes. There was only the sun, the park, and a child's laughter. The moment was broken by a firm but refined voice. "Sophie, sweetheart, didn't I tell you not to talk to strangers?" A woman with neatly styled silver hair, dressed in a tailored blazer and skirt that Abigail had only seen in glossy magazines, approached them. Her face, etched with fine lines, radiated authority and wisdom without diminishing her elegance. She studied Abigail, her gaze initially wary, then softening as she noticed the flower in her hand and the calm expression on her granddaughter's face. "Grandma, this is Abigail," Sophie announced, beaming. "She's my new friend, and she's like a fairy queen." The woman smiled, a subtle curve that lit up her face. "A pleasure, Abigail. I'm Margaret Wentworth." The name sparked recognition in Abigail's mind. Wentworth, the fashion empire. This woman wasn't just elegant, she was a legend in the industry. Margaret observed Abigail closely. She saw past the plain clothes and weary expression, noticing the kindness in her smile towards Sophie, the gentleness in her movements, and a spark of resilience in her eyes, even through the traces of tears. Margaret, a woman who'd fought her own battles, recognized that strength instantly. "Sophie doesn't warm up to people this easily," Margaret said, her tone warmer now. "You must be special." Abigail felt her cheeks flush. "Your granddaughter is a delight. She found me at a tough moment." "Life is full of those moments, my dear," Margaret said, her voice carrying the weight of experience. "What defines us is how we rise after falling." Her eyes landed on Abigail's purse, where the corner of a crumpled resume peeked out. "Are you looking for work?" The question was direct but not intrusive. Abigail nodded, feeling suddenly exposed. "My son, Sophie's father," Margaret began with a slight pause, "is searching for a new nanny for her. We're in a bit of a bind. Sophie has a talent for driving candidates away in under a week." She glanced at her granddaughter, who flashed a mischievous grin. "But with you, the connection was instant. I saw it." The idea was absurd. Abigail, a nanny, in the Wentworth's world. She had no experience, no references for such a role. She opened her mouth to decline, to say it was a mistake, but then she looked at Sophie. The girl's green eyes shone with such pure hope that Abigail's words faltered. Maybe this was it. Maybe this wasn't a coincidence. Maybe the universe was tossing her a lifeline, however unlikely it seemed. I'm not sure I'm the right fit," Abigail stammered. "The fit I'm looking for is someone who makes my granddaughter smile like she's smiling now," Margaret replied, her decision made. "The rest is details. Come to my home tomorrow for a formal talk. Consider it an interview." She handed Abigail a card with an address in one of Chicago's wealthiest neighborhoods. 10 a.m. Be punctual. Sophie clapped ecstatic. "You'll come, Abby, please say you'll come." Looking at that radiant face, Abigail felt her vow from the night before take on new meaning. Starting over. Maybe it wasn't about retracing old paths, but daring to walk a new one. "I'll be there," she said, and with those words a weight lifted from her shoulders. The night that followed was one of the longest of Abigail's life. Margaret Wentworth's card, with its embossed lettering and sleek design, seemed to pulse on the motel nightstand. It was a gateway to a world she didn't know, a realm of wealth and power as distant as the stars. Fear and hope waged a fierce battle in her mind. What if it was a mistake? What if she wasn't enough? The image of Daniel laughing with the other woman haunted her, a cruel reminder of her recent humiliation. He'd always called her ordinary, unremarkable. "You're the kind of woman you settle down with, Abigail, not the kind who dazzles," he'd said once. And at the time she'd taken it as a compliment. Now it felt like a verdict. But then Sophie's beaming face, offering that wilted daisy, overlaid the memory of betrayal. The way the girl trusted her instantly was a balm to her wounded soul. It was for Sophie that she would go. It was for the promise she'd made to herself. With her heart pounding, she spent the night researching the Wentworth family. The headlines were a mix of glamour and tragedy. Margaret's fashion empire, her son James's brilliance as CEO, and the devastating loss of his wife, Sophie's mother, in a car accident 2 years earlier. The articles described James as a recluse, a man hardened by grief, devoted to his work and daughter, but unable to truly connect with her since the loss. He was a broken king in a castle of ice. The next morning, Abigail chose her best outfit, black slacks and a white blouse, simple but well-tailored, saved for special occasions in her old life. She tied her hair into a low, elegant bun and applied minimal makeup to hide the shadows of a sleepless night. As she left the motel, she felt like an imposter heading to a palace. The address led her to a neighborhood where high walls guarded sprawling estates and the cars passing by were worth more than she'd earn in a lifetime. Standing before the Wentworth's imposing gate, she felt breathless. The mansion was a masterpiece of modern architecture, sharp lines, glass, and lush gardens that seemed sculpted by nature itself. Swallowing hard, she pressed the intercom. "Yes?" came a curt male voice. "My name is Abigail Carter. I have an appointment with Mrs. Margaret Wentworth at 10. A pause. Abigail imagined her name being checked, her worth questioned. Then the gates opened with a silent grandeur, inviting her in. She walked down a stone path, feeling the weight of unseen eyes from the glass windows. The front door opened before she reached it, revealing a housekeeper in a crisp uniform. "Miss Carter, please follow me. Mrs. Wentworth is expecting you." The interior was breathtaking. Vaulted ceilings, art on the walls, marble floors that screamed wealth and power. It was designed to intimidate, to make anyone feel small. But then, a small whirlwind of curls came bounding down the stairs. "Abby, you came!" Sophie ran to her, wrapping her arms around Abigail's legs. "I knew you'd come, I told Grandma and Daddy." The girl's warm hug and genuine joy shielded Abigail from the cold grandeur. She knelt to Sophie's level, returning the embrace. "I promised, didn't I?" "Yep. Now you can play with me every day." At that moment, two figures appeared at the top of the staircase. Margaret, with the same encouraging smile from the day before, and a tall man with broad shoulders dressed in a dark suit that seemed tailored to his frame. His dark hair framed a face of sharp, defined features, but his expression was a mask of indifference. His eyes, a stormy blue, held the pain and isolation Abigail had read about. This was James Wentworth, and he studied her as if she were a puzzle he couldn't solve. His gaze was icy, analytical, and for a moment Abigail's confidence wavered. "Good morning, Abigail," Margaret said, descending with natural grace. "I see you've been warmly welcomed." James followed, his steps heavy, echoing in the silence. He didn't greet her. He just kept staring, his eyes scanning her from head to toe, assessing, judging. "So this is the candidate my mother found in a park," he said, his deep voice laced with biting skepticism. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. Abigail's face burned. She stood straighter, meeting his gaze. "Yes, that's me." "Daddy, don't be mean. Abby's awesome," Sophie defended, still clutching Abigail's hand. James ignored his daughter, his focus locked on Abigail. "My daughter needs stability, a qualified professional, not a charity case." Each word was a blow. "Mr. Wentworth," Abigail began, her voice steady despite herself, "with all due respect, you know nothing about me. Your mother invited me for an interview, and I accepted. If you've already decided I'm unfit without hearing me out, I suggest we don't waste each other's time." The silence that followed was thick with tension. Margaret watched with a calculated interest, a faint smile on her lips. James seemed genuinely taken aback. He was used to people shrinking before him, not standing their ground. His blue eyes studied her for a long moment, then, to Abigail's surprise, he gestured toward the library. "My mother will speak with you." The interview, if it could be called that, was one of the strangest experiences of Abigail's life. Margaret asked gentle questions about her life and interests, while James sat silently in a corner armchair, watching her like a hawk. He said nothing, but his presence was a constant pressure. Abigail felt his gaze piercing her defenses, searching for flaws. Meanwhile, Sophie refused to leave her side. She brought her toys, her coloring books, and sat on the rug at Abigail's feet, chattering and showing off her drawings. Without realizing it, Abigail slipped into a natural rhythm with the girl. She praised a sketch, helped find the blue crayon, told a short story about one of the characters in Sophie's book. She forgot she was being judged. For a few minutes it was just her and Sophie, in a bubble of connection. Unbeknownst to her, that was the real interview. Margaret and James weren't just listening to her answers. They were watching her actions. From a discreet corner of the bookshelf, a security camera captured every smile, every gentle gesture. On a tablet, Margaret showed James the footage. He saw how his daughter's face lit up, how Sophie, who barely spoke to other nannies, chatted non-stop with this stranger. He saw the patience in Abigail's eyes, the kindness in her touch. And against his will, a tiny crack formed in the ice around his heart. He saw in Abigail not a polished professional, but something money couldn't buy, a genuine bond with his daughter. When the conversation ended, Margaret stood. "Abigail, we'd like you to do a trial, 1 week. Stay with us, care for Sophie, then we'll decide." Before Abigail could respond, James spoke for the first time since their initial clash. "The rules are clear. Your focus is solely on Sophie. I don't want you meddling in household or family matters. You're here to be a nanny, nothing more. If you cross that line, you're out. Understood?" His cold tone was a warning. He was agreeing, but reluctantly. A business deal, not a vote of confidence. "Crystal clear," Abigail replied, holding her head high. And so Abigail Carter, the woman who'd left her home with a suitcase and a broken heart, moved into the staff wing of the Wentworth mansion. Her room was simple but comfortable, a stark contrast to the dingy motel. The opulence of the house made her feel out of place, but she focused entirely on Sophie. They played in the garden, read stories, baked cookies in the kitchen, to the housekeeper's initial dismay, though she softened at Sophie's joy. Abigail discovered Sophie was a lonely child, starved for attention and affection. Her father, always absent or distant, was a figure she loved but also feared. Her grandmother was loving but consumed by the fashion empire. Abigail became the center of Sophie's small world, their bond deepening daily. James watched from afar. Their interactions were brief and formal. "Good morning." "Good night." He seemed perpetually tense, carrying the weight of the world. Abigail saw the sadness in his eyes when he looked at Sophie, a pain so deep it was almost tangible. He loved his daughter desperately, but didn't know how to reach her through the fog of his grief. One afternoon, Abigail found Sophie in the garden, crying softly by a flower bed. "What's wrong, sweetie?" she asked, sitting beside her. "Today's Mommy's birthday," Sophie whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Daddy's always sad today. He locks himself in his office and doesn't talk to anyone." Abigail's heart clenched. She hugged the girl tightly. "Your mum must have been an amazing woman to have such a wonderful daughter." "She was," Sophie said, sniffling. "She loved sunflowers." In that moment, Abigail made a decision. Leaving Sophie with Margaret, she went to James's office. The door was closed. She hesitated, recalling his warning, "Don't meddle." But Sophie's tear-streaked face spurred her on. She knocked softly. "I said I don't want to be disturbed." James's voice came sharp and raw with pain. Abigail took a deep breath and opened the door. He stood with his back to her, staring out a panoramic window overlooking the garden. On his desk was a single framed photo, a beautiful, smiling woman holding a baby Sophie. "Your daughter needs you," Abigail said, her voice soft but firm. "She doesn't need you to be strong. She needs you to share your pain with her. She misses her mom, too." James turned slowly. His eyes were red, his cold mask shattered. He looked vulnerable, broken. "You don't know anything," he growled. But the conviction was gone. "I know what it's like to lose everything," Abigail said, thinking of her own loss, so different yet so painful. "And I know grief is heavier when you carry it alone. Sophie's out there, crying by the sunflowers her mom loved. She shouldn't cry alone, and neither should you." She left, closing the door softly, her heart racing. She was certain she'd be fired. She'd crossed the line he'd drawn so clearly. But minutes later, from her room's window, she saw a scene that took her breath away. James walked to the garden, knelt by the flower bed and pulled Sophie into his arms. Father and daughter cried together under the afternoon sun. That night, as Abigail tucked Sophie into bed, James appeared at the door. He said nothing for a long moment, just watched. Sophie was already asleep, a peaceful smile on her face. Margaret Wentworth, the ever-watchful matriarch, saw it all. She noticed the softening in her son's voice, the way Abigail brought light back to their shadowed home. In her sharp, strategic mind, a plan began to form. She didn't see Abigail as just an exceptional nanny. She saw a blank canvas of pure potential, a natural beauty and inner strength that the artificial world of fashion desperately needed. The perfect opportunity came on a chaotic Tuesday. The Wentworth brand was in the middle of a critical photo shoot for their new collection's pre-campaign. The lead model, an international star with an ego to match her fee, was stranded by a storm in her home city. Panic swept the studio. The renowned, temperamental photographer threatened to walk out. The team scrambled, with millions at stake. Margaret, calm as ever, had a bold idea. She called the mansion. "Abigail, dear, I need a favor. Bring Sophie to the studio. Tell her it's a surprise." Abigail, confused but compliant, arrived with an excited Sophie. The studio was a whirlwind of stress. Cables, lights, people rushing. At the center was Margaret, a beacon of composure. "Grandma!" Sophie shouted, running to hug her. "My darling," Margaret said, kissing her head. Then she turned to Abigail, her eyes gleaming with intensity. "Abigail, I need your help." "Of course, Mrs. Wentworth. What's wrong?" "The universe happened," Margaret said cryptically. "I need you to try on a dress for me, just for a lighting test. The model bailed and you have the same build. It's just to help the photographer adjust. No one will see your face." Abigail froze. Her, among these glamorous people, wearing a couture piece? It was unthinkable. "Mrs. Wentworth, I can't. I'm the nanny. Look at me." She gestured to her jeans and flats. "I'm not looking at your clothes. I'm looking at you," Margaret insisted, her tone brooking no argument. "It's just a favor. For me." Reluctantly, not wanting to let down the woman who'd given her a chance, Abigail agreed. She was led to a dressing room where a dress hung waiting, a flowing silk gown in a deep emerald green, simple yet breathtakingly elegant. With trembling hands, she shed her loose clothes, her armor of invisibility, and slipped into the Wentworth creation. The fabric glided over her skin like water, hugging her curves in a way she wasn't used to. She looked in the mirror and barely recognized herself. The woman staring back wasn't the betrayed receptionist or the quiet nanny. She was poised, elegant, with a beauty she'd never known she had. The oversized clothes and slumped posture of grief had hidden not just her body, but her essence. When she stepped out, the studio fell silent. The photographer, mid-rant, stopped cold. The crew stared, slack-jawed. Margaret smiled, not with satisfaction, but with triumph. "Just for the lighting test, Leo," Margaret said to the photographer. "Lighting? Margaret, this is more than lighting, this is authentic," Leo whispered, his artist's eyes alight. Abigail stepped onto the set, the heat of the lights warming her skin. Her heart pounded. "What do I do?" she asked quietly. "Nothing," Leo said, camera to his eye. "Just breathe. Forget we're here." She did. She closed her eyes, remembering the pain, the loneliness, her promise to start anew. She thought of Sophie's smile. When she opened her eyes, there was a new depth to her gaze, melancholy mixed with unbreakable strength. She didn't pose. She just was. And the camera captured it all. The way the light carved her collarbone, the graceful curve of her neck, the dignity in her stance. Margaret, from a corner, gave a subtle order. "Keep her face in shadow. She doesn't want to be seen. Focus on the body, the texture, the emotion the dress conveys." The session, meant to be a quick test, lasted nearly an hour. Abigail moved with instinctive grace, a naturalness that professional models spent years faking. She wasn't selling a dress. She was telling a story. The story of a woman rising from ashes. When it was over, she returned to the dressing room, her body shaking with adrenaline. She put on her old clothes, which now felt foreign, inadequate. She was the nanny again, invisible. But something inside her had shifted. She'd glimpsed another Abigail, one who fascinated her. That night, Margaret called an emergency meeting with her marketing team. On the screen, she displayed Abigail's photos, her face always obscured by shadow or angle. The reaction was unanimous. They were the most powerful images the brand had produced in years. "Who is she?" the marketing director asked. "She's our secret," Margaret replied. "She's our new campaign. We'll call it Project Dawn, the birth of a new beauty, a real, authentic muse. We won't reveal her face or name. We'll create a mystery. People won't just buy a dress, they'll buy the promise that true beauty comes from within, that it can be found in any woman." The plan was risky but brilliant, and Margaret knew she had to convince the most important skeptic of all, her son. She showed James the photos in his mansion office. He studied them, brow furrowed in focus. "They're stunning, Mom." Leo outdid himself. "Who's the model? I don't recognize her." "She's not a professional," Margaret said, watching him closely. "It's Abigail." James's head snapped up, his blue eyes wide with shock. He looked at the photos again, now with new understanding. He saw the familiar curve of a shoulder, the posture he saw daily in his home. But he also saw a sensuality and strength he'd never noticed. A wave of conflicting emotions hit him: admiration for the image's beauty, anger at his mother's audacity, and something he didn't dare admit, a possessive, irrational jealousy. The thought of other men seeing these photos, even without knowing her identity, unsettled him deeply. "You had no right," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "She's Sophie's nanny. My daughter's stability is all that matters." "You think this threatens that?" Margaret countered calmly. "I'm giving Abigail a chance, a career. I'm thinking of her future too. And strategically for the company, this is gold. A real story, a real woman. Look at how beautiful she is. Those glasses and baggy clothes hide that beauty." "She's not a product to sell," James snapped, standing. "I won't allow it. It's not your call, James. The campaign is my domain, and Abigail is an adult, capable of her own choices," Margaret said firmly. "I've spoken to her. I offered a contract, full training in secret. She'll be the face of Wentworth, but anonymous, protecting herself and Sophie. She accepted." The revelation hit him like a blow. She'd accepted. She and his mother had planned this behind his back. He felt betrayed, sidelined. The image of Abigail, the quiet, kind woman who brought peace to his home, merged with the powerful, alluring figure in the photos. He didn't know how to reconcile the two. In the days that followed, a new secret settled over the mansion. While James grew colder, treating Abigail with an icy distance, Margaret launched Project Dawn. At night, after Sophie slept, Abigail went to the library, transformed into a private classroom. Margaret taught her about fashion history, fabrics, poise, and presence. She taught her to walk, not as a model, but as a woman aware of her worth. She wasn't molding a puppet, she was polishing a raw diamond. Abigail soaked it up, hungry for knowledge. Each lesson made her stronger, more confident. But James's distance hurt. She didn't understand why he treated her like an outsider again. The tension between them was a taut wire, ready to snap. Meanwhile, the Dawn campaign launched. The mysterious muse's images swept the nation, billboards, magazines, social media. Everyone asked, "Who is she?" The faceless woman became the face of real beauty. The campaign was a viral triumph, and Wentworth soared to new heights. Inside the mansion, though, James watched Abigail bloom under Margaret's guidance, growing more elegant, more assured, and feared losing her. He worried the glamorous world would steal her, pulling her away from Sophie and from him. He found himself watching her, trying to reconcile the nanny in simple clothes with the powerful figure on the city's billboards. The distance he kept was a fragile shield against the feelings she stirred, feelings he saw as a betrayal of his late wife's memory. But as the muse's fame grew, James began to see Abigail's impact, not just on Sophie, but on him. The mansion, once a mausoleum of silence and grief, now echoed with laughter. Sophie's smiles were more frequent, her tears rarer, and he, despite his resistance, felt lighter. Abigail's presence was a calming force, an anchor in his chaotic world. He started coming home earlier, claiming it was for Sophie, but his eyes always sought Abigail. He watched her from afar, enchanted. He saw the patience as she taught Sophie to tie her shoes, the genuine joy when they played together. One rainy afternoon, he found them in the living room building a fort from sheets and pillows. Sophie, crowned with a paper tiara, laughed as Abigail, the castle guardian, made silly voices. For a moment, James allowed himself to smile. He saw not an employee, but the warmth of a family, something he thought he'd lost forever. The realization hit him hard. He wasn't just grateful for Abigail, he was falling for her. The simmering tension in the house was about to erupt with the arrival of a figure from James's past, Vanessa. A famous model and his ex-girlfriend from before his marriage, Vanessa was the opposite of Abigail, calculating, arrogant, and eager to seize the opportunity presented by the now widowed, powerful CEO. Learning of the Dawn campaign and its mysterious muse, she felt her territory threatened and decided to act. Vanessa arrived at the mansion unannounced, using her past with the family as her ticket in. She was a vision of manufactured perfection, from her flawless hair to her designer nails. She found James in the garden awkwardly trying to fix Sophie's swing. "Jimmy, darling, it's been too long," she purred, her voice dripping with seduction. James stiffened. "Vanessa, what are you doing here? I came to see you. I heard about the new campaign, a total hit, but everyone's wondering who the model is. I thought you might need a familiar face for the brand. Mine, perhaps," she suggested, trailing a hand along his arm. At that moment, Abigail and Sophie returned from a walk laughing. Sophie, spotting Vanessa so close to her father, froze, her smile vanishing. She hid behind Abigail, clutching her leg. Vanessa eyed Abigail up and down, her gaze dripping with disdain. "And who's this, the new help?" Before James could respond, Abigail stepped forward calmly. "I'm Abigail, Sophie's nanny." "Oh, the nanny," Vanessa said, her tone laced with contempt. "Must be hard to find good help these days." She turned to Sophie, forcing a smile that didn't reach her cold eyes. "Hi, sweetie. You don't remember me, but I'm an old friend of your daddy's." Sophie didn't reply, just gripped Abigail's leg tighter, eyeing Vanessa with a child's unerring suspicion. Over the next few days, Vanessa became an unwelcome fixture in the mansion. Using business opportunities as an excuse, she tried to worm her way back into James's life. Each time he saw her calculated beauty and transparent ambition, he felt more drawn to Abigail's quiet authenticity. Vanessa's attempts to rekindle their old romance, her hints at a shared future, suffocated him. He didn't want Vanessa. The raw, terrifying truth was that he thought more and more of the nanny, the woman whose presence calmed not just Sophie, but the storm within him. One evening, after another dinner where Vanessa tried and failed to monopolize his attention, James cornered her in the foyer. "Vanessa, this has to stop," he said, his voice low and firm, his patience gone. "Stop what, darling? Our reconnection," she purred, reaching for him. He stepped back sharply. "There's no reconnection. You're here as a guest, nothing more. I'm not interested in revisiting the past. My life, my priorities, are different now. If you can't respect that, the door's right there." The ultimatum hung in the air, cold and final. Vanessa, stunned by the blunt rejection, saw her smile falter. Her eyes flashed with anger, but she was too clever to make a scene. She nodded, jaw tight. "As you wish, James." But inside, a seed of vengeance took root. Meanwhile, Margaret, unaware of this drama but attuned to her son's turmoil, decided it was time to celebrate the Dawn campaign's triumph and reveal her ace. She planned an elegant cocktail party at the mansion for press, investors, and fashion elite. The highlight, she announced, would be unveiling the muse behind the campaign. "Abigail, dear, you'll be our guest of honor," Margaret told her days before. Abigail's stomach dropped. "Me? But I'm the nanny. The campaign was anonymous." "Was," Margaret corrected with a smile. "The mystery served its purpose. Now the world needs to see the woman behind the legend. You're not just the nanny anymore, Abigail. You're the heart of this brand. It's time everyone knows." James, learning of his mother's plan, was torn. The idea of exposing Abigail to that cutthroat world, to public scrutiny, terrified him. Yet a selfish part of him felt a thrill. He remembered the strength and sensuality in those faceless photos. The woman he saw daily in her glasses and loose clothes already intrigued him. What would happen when that veil lifted completely? On the night of the party, Margaret oversaw Abigail's transformation. A team of Wentworth's top stylists was summoned. Abigail's hair, usually in a practical bun, was styled into soft, glossy waves cascading over her shoulders. Her glasses were set aside, revealing almond-shaped hazel eyes that seemed to hold entire stories. The makeup was subtle, enhancing her natural glow, her lips lightly colored. And then the dress. A Margaret creation, a flowing crimson silk gown that hugged her curves with fluid sensuality and elegance. The neckline was modest, but the cut was a work of art, hinting at the powerful silhouette America had admired on billboards, but no one had seen in person. When Abigail descended the staircase, the room fell momentarily silent. James, mid-conversation with an investor, turned and his jaw dropped. His breath caught. This wasn't the nanny, not the woman in baggy clothes. This was a vision, a goddess. The beauty he'd only sensed in the photos was now real, overwhelming, and far more potent than he'd imagined. A spark he'd kept buried flared into an uncontrollable blaze. Abigail, nervous but steadied by Margaret's firm hand, was introduced. The crowd's reaction was awe and admiration. The woman behind the year's most talked-about campaign wasn't a supermodel, but a real, relatable beauty, stunning precisely because of it. Nathan, the young, charismatic Wentworth marketing director, was among the first to approach. Smitten by the campaign's images, he was instantly captivated by the real woman. "Abigail, a pleasure to finally put a face to this phenomenon," he said, his smile charming. "You're even more striking in person." He guided her through the party, introducing her to key figures, keeping the conversation lively and engaging. Abigail, initially shy, relaxed under his kindness, responding with her natural wit and warmth. From across the room, James watched. A primal, consuming emotion gripped him. Jealousy. A corrosive, irrational jealousy. He saw how Nathan looked at her, how his hand hovered near her back. He saw Abigail's smile, a smile he felt should be only for him and Sophie. Each laugh she shared with Nathan was a knife in his chest. Sophie, glowing in her party dress, ran to her father. "Daddy, look at Abby. Doesn't she look like a real princess?" "Yes, sweetheart, she does," James replied, his voice tight, his eyes fixed on the pair across the room. Margaret approached, noting her son's unease. "Jealous, James?" she asked, a playful smile on her lips. "Maybe now you'll see what you risk losing if you keep hiding." The party ended, and the guests left. The mansion fell silent, but James's mind was a storm. Abigail, feeling euphoric and exhausted, retreated to her room's balcony, needing a moment to process the surreal night. The cool Chicago air calmed her. She pulled a napkin from her clutch. On it, Nathan had scribbled his personal number. "In case you want to talk about the future, or anything else," he'd said. She stared at the paper, a confused smile on her lips. It was the first time since her breakup that a man had shown interest. It was flattering, new, strange. "Hope I'm not interrupting." James's deep voice startled her. He stood in the balcony doorway, his silhouette dark against the hall's light. He stepped closer, his eyes locking on the napkin in her hand. He saw Nathan and a string of numbers. The blaze of jealousy within him roared. He felt the panic of imminent loss. She stood there, radiant, desired by others, with the world at her feet. She didn't need him or this job anymore. She could leave any moment. The thought of returning to an empty, silent house was unbearable. He stopped inches from her, his face a mask of intensity. Abigail could feel his warmth, see the storm in his blue eyes. "Throw it away," he said, his voice a low, possessive growl. Abigail stared, shocked by the command. "What?" "The paper. Throw it away," he repeated, stepping closer, invading her space. "You're not calling him. You're not going anywhere." He raised a hand, his thumb tracing her jaw, the touch sending a jolt through her body. "Because you already have a place. Here. With me." She looked into those stormy blue eyes and saw not the cold CEO or the grieving father, but a man battling his demons, terrified of losing her. "James?" she whispered, her voice trembling, the napkin still in her hand. "I saw how he looked at you," James continued, his voice hoarse, ignoring the paper and focusing only on her. "How everyone looked. and I felt the ground slipping away. For months I hid behind my grief, used my daughter as an excuse to keep my distance, to feel nothing. But it was a lie. From the day you walked into this house, you brought color, life. You saved Sophie, and without even knowing it, you were saving me too. He leaned closer, their foreheads nearly touching, their breaths quickened. He took her hand holding the napkin, and with a gentleness that belied his intense tone, let it fall to the floor, a symbolic gesture that nothing else mattered. Abigail's heart stopped, then raced, and then he closed the distance. His lips met hers in a kiss that held everything they'd suppressed for months, possessive yet desperate, tender yet passionate. It spoke of pain and healing, loneliness and reunion. Abigail's hands rose to his neck, fingers tangling in his hair, pulling him closer. She kissed him back with equal fire, giving herself fully to the moment, to him. The crimson gown, the moonlit balcony, everything blurred. Their world was just this kiss, this confession. A few feet away in the shadowed hallway, Margaret Wentworth stood. She'd come to say goodnight but paused at their voices. With her heart full, she heard her son's confession, the one she'd long awaited. She saw the kiss that sealed their fate. Margaret didn't move. She leaned against the wall, closed her eyes, and let a single tear of pure joy slide down her cheek, not as a businesswoman seeing a plan succeed, but as a mother watching her broken son finally allow himself happiness again. She saw the promise of a new beginning, of laughter filling the halls, of a family rebuilt. Silently, she turned and descended the stairs, leaving them in their private world, her heart overflowing with certainty that the woman her son once overlooked was the star his soul needed. On the balcony, the kiss deepened. When they finally parted, breathless, James kept his face close, their foreheads touching. The storm in his eyes had calmed, replaced by raw, vulnerable adoration. "I don't want to be afraid to live anymore, Abby," he whispered. "I'm only afraid of living without you." "You won't have to," she replied, her voice thick with emotion, stroking his cheek. "I'm not going anywhere." That night was a turning point. The invisible barrier between them dissolved. The passion, held back so long, erupted with overwhelming force. James led her inside, and for the first time the door didn't close for an employee or friend, but for the woman he loved. The crimson gown, a symbol of her transformation, slipped to the floor, and in each other's arms they found an intimacy beyond the physical, a collision of souls that recognized each other in pain and now met in healing. The days that followed were dizzyingly joyful. The mansion, once a place of silence and grief, brimmed with life. The staff, with discreet smiles, watched their once shadowy boss become a man who laughed openly, stole kisses from Abigail in the kitchen during breakfast, and came home early not just for Sophie, but for the woman waiting for him. Sophie, with her childlike wisdom, was the biggest champion of their union. To her, the family she drew in her sketchbooks had become real. Seeing them hold hands, embrace, was the fulfillment of her greatest wish. The news of the romance between the CEO and the former nanny turned brand muse caused a media frenzy. But James, with Abigail firmly by his side, handled it with newfound confidence. They gave one joint interview, sharing their story with dignity and truth. Instead of scandal, the public saw a genuine love story, and admiration for Abigail only grew. With James's unwavering support and Margaret's mentorship, Abigail embraced her new role in the world. Months later, on a sunny afternoon, in the same Millennium Park bench where it all began, James recreated the scene. While Sophie played nearby, he knelt before Abigail, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. "Right here, a little girl with a flower brought two broken hearts together," he said, his voice thick. "You taught me to live again, to love again. You gave me a family. Abigail Carter, the woman I was fool enough to overlook. Will you be the woman I spend every second of my life with? Will you marry me?" With tears of joy streaming down her face, Abigail gave the surest yes of her life as Sophie ran to hug them, sealing the moment. The wedding was an intimate, stunning affair in the mansion's garden, the place that had witnessed their journey. Abigail, in a gown she and Margaret designed, was the picture of happiness. James beside her couldn't look away. his love evident to all. Sophie, the official flower girl, handed them the rings with a smile worth more than any blessing. That night, under a starry sky, as they danced their first dance as husband and wife, James pulled her closer. "Remember that night on the balcony?" he whispered in her ear. "I said you had a place here with me." "I remember," she smiled, resting her head on his chest. "I was wrong," he continued. "You don't just have a place. You are the place, you're my home." Abigail looked up and kissed him, a kiss no longer frantic with desperation but calm with the deep promise of forever. The woman who'd once been betrayed, who felt invisible, who arrived with nothing but a broken heart, had found everything. She was no longer the star the world wanted to see. She was the sun around which his world now revolved, in an orbit of love, happiness, and endless new beginnings. What did you think of the story? Leave your opinion in the comments with a score from 0 to 10. Subscribe to the channel and click on the bell to follow all our stories. Thank you very much and see you in the next video.